In Boston, Massachusetts, 1783, Richter is being sent away by his mother, Julia Belmont. He thought that he was supposed to fight evil, but his mother thinks he'll be safer in France. Just then, All Rocks, a vampire, confronts Julia. She orders Richter to go to the ship, but he hides behind some boxes and witnesses the fight between his mother and the vampire. All Rocks transforms into a giant monster, prompting Richter to step in as he attempts to attack the monster using his powers. He then sees as All Rocks kills his mother. All Rocks approaches him, saying that he knows the feeling of pain and hate. He reveals that his mom took someone from him that he loved, that's why he killed her. He promises to kill him as well one day. 9 years later, Richter and Maria Renard are in a revolutionary meeting in the woods of the Vendée in western France. She reveals that the king has been arrested because the government in Paris has overthrown the monarchy and declared a republic. She urges her people to revolt against them. Just then, they get ambushed by vampires, but Richter and co. manage to take them out. Maria conjures creatures from the other world to attack them as well. One of the vampires reveals that before the moon is full, the vampire messiah will come, called the Devourer of Light, who will eat the sun. He warns Richter that he'll suffer and die, but Richter slays him on the spot. Maria wonders what the vampire messiah means and figures why there seem to be more vampires around there lately. She realizes that they're gathering at the chateau. Richter advises Maria to discuss this issue with the abbot Emmanuel, who is no friend to the revolution. They head to see him and inform him that they killed 3 vampires that night. Maria shares that the vampires are congregating at the chateau, but the abbot doesn't believe her and explains that the Marquis is a pillar of their community who would never welcome vampires into his home. He then calls Maria's revolution a godless mob. He accepts to send his spies to the chateau to find out if the Marquis really opened his doors to the undead. He comments that evil can be more subtle than is often supposed. Jack, a member of the revolution, spots a woman with long canines in a dark alley. He attempts to shoot her but gets attacked and bitten. He then gets dragged into the chateau, where the Marquis is complaining about peasants, describing their blood as dull. The Marquis and the other vampires proceed to drink him. They then throw him on another pile of dead bodies. Richter and Maria get attacked by night creatures, and the duo fight them using their powers. Maria's mother also assists them in the fight. Annette and Edouard, who arrive from the island of Saint-Domingue, show up and help. Annette explains that the night creatures are demons made from human corpses, grafted onto souls from hell. It's a necromancy procedure that can only be performed by dark mages known as Forge Masters. She surmises that there is one around the area. Annette and Edward are actually there to speak to Richter about the vampire messiah. In Nantes, western France, All Rocks arrives by ship and meets a vampire called Vaublanc. He tells him that he can tell his messiah that he is there before walking away. The abbot narrates that the so-called revolution isn't for the struggle of the rights of men, but it's an abomination and affront to the natural order and God and his church. The abbot's own holy order, the Knights of St. John, which was founded to protect pilgrims in the wars for the Holy Land, has been commended to submit to the godless state, but he would rather die than bend the knee to them. He's hoping that these days will soon be over because the deliverer is at hand, a new Joan of Arc, who is a mighty warrior queen that will lead them to salvation. She'll raise a holy army of the righteous to crush the blasphemers. The scene then shifts to show a woman arriving in Paris, claiming she's a representative of the Messiah. It turns out she's a vampire who slays some guards when they ask her for the reason of her visit. Maria informs Richter and co. that the slaves rose up and burned all the sugar plantations and killed the slave owners. Annette adds that many white colonists were vampires and the island was teeming with all kinds of evil. It turns out Annette was a slave and Edward was an opera singer. Richter wants to know more about the vampire messiah. Annette explains that in Saint-Domingue, there is a priestess and a powerful sorcerer who asked her to find Richter. She said that something is changing out there in the old world. For centuries, vampires have lived coiled around the old houses of Europe and were close allies of the dukes and barons. But many vampires resented their reliance on human kings, so this messiah promises to make them unquestioned masters of the world, which means first they need to crush the revolution. Annette resumes talking about the messiah, saying that she was a monster before she became a vampire. Her name is Countess Elizabeth Bathory, and she loved torturing young boys and girls. Tara recognizes her name and gasps in shock. In the chateau, the representative of the Messiah named Drolta is offered 3 young girls to feed on. Tara tells Maria and the others the reason she fled from Russia is because she grew up with a family which are a clan of speakers. But then soldiers and vampires raided them, along with Countess Bathory and her attack dog Drolta. They captured her sister, and Bathory tortured her. Tara tried to save her but couldn't, so she killed her before fleeing Russia to the west. Maria buries her dead creatures, and Edward sings to honor their deaths. That night, Richter, Maria, Annette, and Edward decide to go to investigate the chateau. On their way there, they discuss Annette's powers. She's descended from an Orisha ancestor and has powers over metal and rock. They reach the chateau and spot the Marquis giving a cart full of corpses to a night creature. Annette and Co. decide to follow the creature in order to find their maker, the Forge Master. The latter will use these bodies to turn them into more night creatures. Annette recognizes the Comte de Vaublanc. The latter enslaved and murdered her mother. Annette uses her power in an attempt to open the gate and get to him. The vampires and night creatures notice them and proceed to attack them. A fight erupts, but soon Richter and Co. get overpowered and choose to flee. Annette erects a bridge with her power. Unfortunately, Edward doesn't make it and gets bitten. The others manage to flee to safety. Annette is heartbroken as she bursts out crying. Edward's body then gets transferred into a magical machine. The abbot and all rocks are watching. A blue-eyed winged night creature comes out of the machine. All rocks says, "Well, well, glory be to God." Vaublanc gives his devotion forever to Countess Elizabeth Bathory, the devourer of light. He then gets branded by Drolta. Annette is feeling guilty over Edward's death. Richter and Maria assure her that it wasn't her fault. Annette tells them that Edward was her only family following her mother's death. As a child in Saint-Domingue, 1780, Annette watched her mother getting killed by a slave master called Vaublanc. He killed her after discovering spells cast and charms on his plantation. 10 years later, and at the age of 16, the vampires try to brand Annette, but since she is connected to African deities, she inherited from her father's bloodline the power of the god of war and iron, named Ogun. Her powers over rock and metal began to manifest, but she couldn't control them, so she ran away from the vampires. She managed to escape and met Edward, an opera singer, who sang for the colonizers as cover for his work hiding runaways. Edward took her up to the mountains to join the Maroons, who were escaped slaves mobilizing a resistance. She met Cecile, the high priestess who taught her spells and how to open spiritual crossroads for ceremonies. With the Maroons, Annette and Edward killed their slavers. Annette then hunted down Vaublanc, but he changed into a bat and fled. The team liberated Saint-Domingue, but Cecile started having visions of the vampire messiah who would conquer Europe first unless they stopped her. Annette and Edward decided to go to France to hunt down Countess Bathory. In the present day, All Rocks confronts the abbot's right-hand man Mizrak about why the abbot is forging night creatures for the vampire messiah. He warns him about the messiah's brutality and what she is capable of. He cautions that the moment she doesn't need them, she'll turn on them and murder them one by one. The Messiah learns from Drolta that the devotees are filling the chateau, and the Marquis is eager to meet her. Countess Bathory recounts a dream she had the other night about the Empress of Russia, the Ottoman Sultan, and the Pope, all kneeling before her and kissing her feet. Annette addresses the revolutionaries and inspires them, while the abbot incites his followers into hating the revolutionaries and calling them evil. Just then, the revolutionaries get attacked by night creatures. Richter and Co. slaughter them. The night creature forged from Edward saves Annette's life. She recognizes him by his eyes, then she breaks down in tears as her friend turned into a monster conjured from hell. The abbot scolds Edward for saving Annette. He reminds him that he was created to obey him and he exists only for him. Edward looks at his reflection in the abbot's sword and gasps in shock. Apparently, he's still aware of everything. Tara believes that the abbot is the Forge Master's prisoner. She insists that he is a good man because he helped her once. Annette stresses that she saw Edward's eyes and doesn't want to abandon him now. Richter tries to reason with her, but she won't listen. The team then disagrees on what to do next. Richter doesn't want to charge into the abbey to defeat the sorcerer. He insists that they need a plan. Annette is confident that she can defeat them. She explains that the abbey is made of stone, so she can bury them in their own church by crashing it down around their heads. Richter urges everyone to think of a proper plan. Tara informs them that there is another way in, a secret underground passageway into the abbey. She also insists on coming with them. It turns out Allrox and Mizrak are lovers. From their conversation, we learn that the Forge Master is the abbot, and he means to betray the Messiah. He's manufacturing all these devils in order to destroy her. Allrox warns Mizrak that the Messiah will turn on them, and he urges him not to follow this path, but Mizrak says he has faith in God. Richter, Maria, Annette, and Tara sneak into the abbey's cellars. Meanwhile, the Marquis introduces Drolta to the abbot. Allrox pays Edward a visit in his cell. He can sense a human soul in him. Edward doesn't know who and what he is, and asks for his freedom. As Richter and Co. explore the dungeons looking for Edward, they hear him singing. They then get ambushed by the night creatures. Annette and Co. slay them. Just then, the abbot arrives to give Drolta a tour of his Forge Master workshop, since she wants to meet the night creatures. Tara and Co. face them. They fight, and the abbot forbids Drolta from attacking Maria, reminding her that they don't slaughter children. The Marquis charges into Richter, but he manages to kill him. Annette apologizes to Edward and offers to end his suffering, but he starts weeping and hides in the corner. Annette then battles Drolta and uses her powers against her. Tara confronts the abbot, but he claims that the kingdom of God is under threat and he's doing this to protect it. Richter is shocked to see Allrox in the dungeons. He and his friends then flee. Drolta refers to Allrox as the Aztec. He tells her that the Messiah is expecting him. In the woods, Richter looks at his reflection in the lake and weeps. His encounter with Allrox reminded him of the day the vampire killed his mother. Annette patches up Maria's wounds by reciting an incantation. At the chateau, Drolta and the vampires attend the Marquis's funeral. The wife intends to keep his decapitated head around in her arms. Tara tells her daughter Maria that when she arrived in Paris 17 years ago, people were wary of her, but the abbot showed her a lot of compassion. It was a safe place for her at the time. They then see as Annette is preparing herself to go back to the abbey. She wants to free Edward. Maria urges her to wait for Richter. They need to regroup and devise a new plan. Tara reminds her that Allrox and Drolta are very powerful vampires. Maria adds that they need to understand their enemies in order to defeat them. Annette agrees not to attack them for now, but she decides to spy on them. She's actually mad at Richter for running away. She comments that if she let her past terrify her, she'd never be free of slavery. As Annette heads out, she spots Drolta being driven in a carriage, so she follows her. Drolta meets with Allrox, who is feeding off the wealthy. She reprimands him about it, stressing that they're trying to preserve an alliance with the humans in this town. She confesses that she hates making deals with the humans and feeding on peasants only, in exchange for some influence among the aristocracy. She also can't stand the abbot, but has to put up with him in exchange for his night creatures. Drolta wonders if Allrox will pledge his allegiance to Bathory, but he comments that he's never been a believer. Drolta reveals that she was a priestess of Sekhmet, who was the Egyptian goddess of war and vengeance. She urges him to join her so that they make a new world that will last. Annette overheard the conversation. She then spots Vaublanc feeding on a peasant. She saves him and faces the vampire. Using her powers, she transforms the bars of the graveyard into a cage made of crucifixes. When he touches them, his flesh starts to burn. Vaublanc gives her some information about Countess Bathory, saying that she'll restore the world to its natural order, because she's not just a vampire, she's a goddess who drank the blood of the Egyptian goddess Sekhmet, the daughter of Ra, so she'll never be defeated. The sun rises, and Annette leaves Vaublanc in his cage to burn to death. Abbott pays Tara and Maria a visit. He claims that he's doing this to save his church. So he's building an army, but Maria warns him that he's fighting on the wrong side with vampires. The abbot brushes it off, saying that he needs to make sacrifices. Tara starts crying, wishing she never met him. The abbot then lets it slip that Maria is his daughter. Maria is shocked and walks out. The abbot promises Tara to keep Maria safe. In the pub, Richter meets an elderly man. A vampire then storms the place and challenges the old man to fight. The latter beheads him. It turns out he is Juste Belmont, Richter's grandfather. Countess Erzsébet Bathory, also known as the Vampire Messiah, arrives in France. Drolta welcomes her. Erzsébet says her sister the moon burns brightly, and soon they will force their father Amun-Ra the sun down on his knees to beg for mercy. Erzsébet vows to show him none as she'll cut off his head. She then feeds on a young woman. It turns out Juste has been there in France all the time since Richter came. He's been keeping an eye on him. Juste had a deal with Tara. She promised not to tell Richter where to find his granddad. Juste has been giving her money to help out. Juste tells Richter that he was a hero once, and he had other powers along with the whip that he used to kill vampires. He was the most powerful magician in the entire Belmont line, but a vampire called Lord Woodvan killed his wife Lydie and his friend Maxim. Soon after, he lost his powers. Annette uses her magic to speak to Cecile for guidance. She informs her of Edward's demise. Cecile reminds her that his soul is still alive and urges her to take courage from that. She adds that Annette's power is old thanks to her ancestors, so she can use it to defeat the Messiah. Mizrak wonders why Richter was so afraid of Olrox. The vampire confides that he once loved a man who fought for justice and freedom, but Julia Belmont killed him because he was a vampire. Mizrak blames Olrox for his death, but the latter retorts that he turned his ex into a vampire because he wanted to be with him forever. Mizrak wonders if that's what Olrox has planned for him, but Olrox assures him that he won't because he's not in love with him. Edward chats with a night creature guarding his cell. It turns out he's Jack, the man who got bitten in the city before. He confesses that he doesn't accept his fate. Maria confronts the abbot for ignoring her whole life. He assures her that he didn't. He also protected her despite knowing that she's a witch. He asks her to join him, but she refuses. She then hears the crowd cheering as the Messiah arrives. Annette reunites with Tara and Maria and urges them to have courage as there is light in the darkness. Richter and his granddad talk about Julia's death. Juste regrets not being by her side and believes that he is a terrible father. They're both ambushed by the Countess's vampires, who get the upper hand quickly and surround Richter. They also hold Juste captive. Nikolai taunts Richter and torments him, saying that the Messiah will torture his loved ones, Maria and Annette, and turn them into vampires. By saying that, they awaken something inside of him, and his magic comes back as he shouts and bursts. Richter fights and defeats all of them using his magic. He and Juste then take Nikolai out. The Countess addresses the vampires as their queen and as their god. They cheer for her as she offers them drinks. Drolta knows how the Countess can secure the abbot's loyalty forever and informs her that he has a daughter. Maria is mad at her mother for hiding the truth regarding her father. Tara explains that she kept it a secret to keep her safe from people's gossip. Just then, they get ambushed by vampires. The mother and daughter manage to fend them off. One of the vampires attempts to hurt Maria, but Richter saves her just in time. Maria notices that he is wearing a headband. The Countess informs Olrox that she intends to start an empire. She showcases her abilities to him, vowing to make the abbot worship her. Drolta reveals that once the Countess conquers Europe, Olrox will be her guide into America. Olrox doesn't seem enthusiastic about the proposition. Tara apologizes to Richter for keeping Just's presence a secret, but he understands. They reunite with Annette, and Richter promises her to get Edward out with his magic. They talk about their fear of losing their loved ones and share a moment. Countess Bathory checks the night creatures, and Drolta orders the abbot to make more. The Countess wants the abbot to give up something to prove his love for her. Drolta informs him that the next day, the Messiah will come to the house of his god to seal the alliance in blood. She suggests he sacrifice someone he loves, his daughter Maria. Annette and Co. devise a new plan to attack the abbey. Maria doesn't want her father, the abbot, to get hurt, but Tara reminds her that he made his choice. They plan to stop the abbot from creating more night creatures. Orlox then barges into their house, revealing that the Forge Master has a machine. Richter attempts to fight him, but Olrox hides and urges him to destroy the abbot's machine. He warns that if he wants to defeat Erzsébet, he has no choice but to trust him. Soon, Annette and Co. arrive. Olrox urges them to read the book he gave them. It's a guide for the machine. It contains spells that the abbot has been using. Tara tries to decode it to find out how to destroy the machine. The book is written in Enochian, the language of hell. Maria visits the abbot to warn him of an imminent attack. She wants him to leave with her so that he can try to be her father. Instead, he decides to capture her so that he sacrifices her. He believes sacrificing her in the house of God will send her soul to heaven. Mizrak sees as the night creatures sees her. Tara managed to decode the book and learned that the machine cannot be destroyed, because it was forged in hell by a very powerful evil. The only way to deal with it is to send it back there. The book will enable her to create a portal, and Annette can use her powers to push the machine through it. Mizrak warns them that the abbot is going to sacrifice Maria to Erzsébet. Countess Bathory performs a sun-blotted ceremony, which darkens the skies and allows Drolta to achieve her true form. Countess Bathory successfully blotted out the sun and is fully channeling the Egyptian goddess of war, Sekhmet. Richter wonders what happened to the sun. Annette explains that Erzsébet summoned an eclipse. The team plans to blast the abbot's machine right back to hell while Richter rescues Maria. But first, Mizrak and Co. have to take out the numerous guards blocking the abbey's entrance. The abbot is about to sacrifice Maria, but Tara shows up just in time to stop him. She points out that the monsters he creates aren't serving God. Maria warns her father that making a pact with the devil won't save his church. She vows that the revolution will raze all his churches to the ground. Richter orders the abbot to surrender, but he refuses. Tara tries to recite an incantation to open a portal to hell so that Annette can use her powers to push the abbot's machine through it. Just then, Drolta in her evolved form arrives and fights Richter, Maria, and Mizrak. Annette heads to the dungeons to where the machine is and hears Edward singing. She slays the night creatures blocking her way. She then heads to see Edward and tries to break him out, but he refuses, stating that his work there isn't finished. He says that when he sings, there is light in the darkness that touches souls. He urges her to hurry to the portal. Tara and Annette work together to send the machine back to hell. Richter fights Drolta and deals considerable damage to her with his magical whip, but then Countess Bathory arrives. She approaches Maria, who attacks her using her magical creatures, but the Countess isn't defeated. Tara sees that her daughter is in danger, so she stops reciting the incantation. Richter also attempts to harm the Countess, but to no avail. Olrox spirits Mizrak away to safety. The Countess hears Edward singing, so she orders Drolta to make it stop. Tara pleads with the abbot not to let the Countess kill their daughter. She begs him to turn his night creatures on her. The Countess claims she doesn't want to kill Maria. She wants to be honored with human sacrifice and asks Maria if she is a virgin. She wants to give her eternal life. The night creature sent by Drolta tries to kill Edward, but Jack, in his night creature form, saves him. Mizrak wants to go back and fight alongside Richter and the others, but Olrox refuses to let him go. He stresses that no one can fight Erzsebet. Mizrak urges him to fight her, but Olrox points out that he isn't powerful enough. He doesn't want Mizrak to go back because he doesn't want him to die. Mizrak ignores him and heads back. Annette can't get the machine through the portal, as Sarah sacrifices herself to Countess Bathory to save Maria. The portal closes. Edward hugs Annette, but she urges him to leave. Annette blows a hole in the wall so that Richter can carry Maria to safety. The Countess bites Tara and offers her her blood, thus turning her into a vampire. Drolta chases Richter and co, but Alucard shows up and kills her. He introduces himself as Alucard, the son of Dracula, and he hopes he's not too late.